Bonjour et bienvenue dans ce nouveau rendez-vous de
Welcome
l'expertise.
to this new expertise rendezvous. We're in Mauritius for a splendid broadcast dedicated to the ocean. The expertise are moments for debate and reflection on issues such as cooperation, solidarity, investment, and sustainable development, how to preserve the oceans, how are Indian Ocean islands tackling the threats to biodiversity and marine resources. That is the title of this rendezvous. It takes up a question that will be at the heart of the issues addressed at the forthcoming United Nations Conference on the Oceans. It will be held in Nice, in the south of France, in a few weeks' time. Let's talk about the oceans. They cover more than 70% of the Earth's surface. They perform essential, vital functions. They regulate the climate. They are home to most of the world's biodiversity. And they provide a livelihood for more than 3 billion people. But today, this vital resource is under pressure more than ever. And in the front line, we find small island states, such as this one in the Indian Ocean, as here in Mauritius. Behind the postcard image, very real threats are affecting this island and all those in the region. We're going to talk about that. Plus, the consequences of these threats are no longer merely hypothetical. Here they are. Measured, documented, visible. In response, a whole community of players supporting sometimes the expertise. Throughout the broadcast, we will see that local players are mobilizing, sometimes supported by the AFD and Expertise France group, so that they can provide solutions to preserve the ocean. And obviously, this is a political process. And before we meet some of these players, we're going to meet the gentleman who is welcoming.
Tout de suite, le rejoindre. De l'Institut français de Maurice que je vous rejoins, Quentin Bieler. Je le disais en vous annonçant, vous êtes le directeur de l'Institut.
So it is in this lovely media library at the Institut Français de Maurice that I find you, Quentin Bieler. Hello and thank you.
Je voulais commencer par rappeler que les instituts.
I'm going to get prepared. I'd like to remind that the Institut Français across the world are participating in the dissemination of the French language and culture. And I would like to hear what you'd like to say regarding the activities you organize here for the public. Hello, Gallagher. Yes, here we are in a beautiful place. This is the media library in the Institut Français de Maurice, but there are many more other such spaces to organize events for all kinds of audiences. We have the this library, we have an auditorium with a screen. We have the Fab Lab. Yes, I've been to the Fab Lab. I've seen a 3D printer. And yes, it spans across several generations. It's a living place. We also have classes, meeting rooms. We have a Campus France space to allow younger people from Mauritius to find counseling to go study in France. We have a restaurant. It's really a place open to everybody. You have a restaurant? Sorry for interrupting. So obviously, you want to be rooted in the territory, in the local culture. Absolutely. In Mauritius, there is a very tasty local cuisine. It's a multicultural place, rich of several cultures. And we have made a decision. We have chosen to organize a cooking residency regarding the Reunion Island or Mauritius curry, which is originally from India, but has been revisited here. We did it previously with another cooking residency on the dolpuri, which is also something imported from India. Curry is something in between curry. It's curry. It's another way to say curry. I'd like to take the opportunity to say that here in Mauritius, and I discovered it when I came here, there is a very special music called the segay. And segay is a combination between Segan and reggae. And I'd like to pay tribute to Kaya, an artist we listened to here. Now, this broadcast is dedicated to preservation of biodiversity and marine biodiversity, protection of the oceans, and the climate-related challenges that our small island states such as Mauritius are facing. So what role or roles can the Institut Français de Maurice play in this fight? Well, through our cultural programs, we offer a number of events, workshops. They all have to do with conservationism, the fight against climate change, and the preservation of natural resources, including the ocean. And last month, for instance, the French NGO that fights plastic pollutions across the ocean, Plastic Odyssey, yes, we will talk about that later. Absolutely, they stopped their ship here, and we showed two videos, two documentaries regarding their action. In June, there will be a week dedicated to land and water. There will be a workshop on the climate. And I would like to talk about an action organized by the Institut Français with the embassy to show the emergence of architecture. We have the architectural school in Nantes that has a premises here in Mauritius, and the former director led to the creation of a think tank for architecture based on the expertise on climate change and sustainable development called SETI. And this think tank is the Center for Study of Indian Ocean Cultural Development. And we supported the creation of this initiative, and we organized, or rather we hosted a congress of this think tank based on the ecosystem resilience, the infrastructure of small island states, especially in the Indian Ocean, when facing water-related disasters, which have been made more serious by climate change. And another seminar organized by this think tank will be hosted very soon. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Quentin Biller from the Institut Français in Mauritius. And very soon we will be welcoming the guests of our first round table. But I'd like to go to Paris for a few minutes to listen to the gentleman thanks to whom this event is organized here in Mauritius. It was very important for him. This is our dialogue sequence.
Bonjour Jérémy Pellet.
Bonjour Gallagher.
Vous allez bien?
Très bien.
On a le plaisir de se retrouver pour un nouveau rendez-vous de l'expertise, celui-ci dédié aux océans, avec évidemment en ligne de mire l'objectif de développement durable 14 qui vise la préservation, l'exploitation des océans, des mers, des ressources marines dans une dynamique de développement durable, bien évidemment. Pourquoi c'est important pour vous de parler aujourd'hui de la préservation des océans à travers cette émission?
Très heureux d'organiser ce rendez-vous de l'expertise à Maurice. Merci à l'Institut français de l'organiser.
Quentin Bieler qu'on vient justement d'entendre. Oui.
C'est très important cette conférence aujourd'hui parce que dans quelques semaines va se tenir la grande conférence des Nations Unies sur les océans à Nice, co-organisée avec le Costa Rica, que nous appuyons d'ailleurs côté Expertise France, sur un sujet majeur, les océans, majeur pour notre planète, parce que les océans, c'est les 2/3 du carbone capté. On parle souvent de la forêt, mais on oublie le rôle absolument essentiel des océans. Et c'est un environnement très fragile. Les 2/3 des espèces marines sont aujourd'hui dans une situation de danger, c'est ce que les scientifiques nous disent. Et donc il est très important que nous arrivions à articuler les activités humaines avec la préservation de cette richesse. Donc c'est un enjeu absolument majeur.
Nous sommes à Maurice pour ce rendez-vous, mais notre regard, les sujets que l'on va traiter vont nous emmener bien au-delà des frontières de l'île. Pourquoi c'est important justement d'avoir cette approche régionale quand on parle de préservation, de protection de la biodiversité marine?
Les océans ne connaissent pas de frontières, la pollution non plus. Donc en plus des projets qui doivent être conduits avec les gouvernements, il est extrêmement important de travailler à l'échelon régional, voire continental. Nous travaillons par exemple avec l'Union africaine pour faire en sorte de les accompagner sur cette stratégie économie bleue. Nous travaillons aussi avec le groupe AFD dans son ensemble sur une approche régionale qui peut porter, avec le soutien de l'Union européenne, par exemple, sur les territoires ultramarins de l'Union européenne, ou alors sur des sujets comme les sujets de sécurité maritime, de transport maritime pour tout l'océan Indien, avec le projet Crimario, comment est-ce qu'on articule la manière dont tous les États de l'océan Indien travaillent sur le transport et la pêche, et faire en sorte eh bien, de pouvoir avoir cette approche qui soit intégrée à tous les échelons, local, national, régional et mondial sur les océans.
Est-ce que vous pouvez justement nous donner un exemple très concret de cette approche, de cette dynamique régionale à laquelle vous faisiez référence à l'instant?
Je pense que le projet le plus emblématique sur ces sujets de protection des aires maritimes, articulation entre littoral et les océans, c'est notre projet Varuna. Une centaine d'acteurs réunis autour de ce projet qui est emblématique de l'ambition mondiale d'arriver à ce qu'on appelle le 30 x 30, de 30% des aires marines protégées d'ici 2030, de 30% de l'océan protégé à travers ces aires marines d'ici 2030. Et donc ce projet-là qui est mis en œuvre avec un certain nombre de partenaires, je crois qu'on va en entendre quelques-uns tout à l'heure, je pense la Fondation Odysseo, je pense aussi à l'articulation avec le Festival du Vivant de l'île Maurice, avec les Blue Talks qui sont aussi organisés sur ces sujets-là. Eh bien, c'est un peu ce qu'on doit faire, c'est-à-dire discuter avec les États, avec la société civile, avec le secteur privé, pour trouver le bon mode de préservation durable de cette ressource très précieuse que sont les océans.
Merci Jérémy Pellet.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci à Jérémy Pellet, directeur général d'Expertise.
Thanks to Jérémy Pellet, General Manager of Expertise France. And we're going to start the first roundtable discussion of the day. And it is entitled Oceans Under Pressure Between Climate Threats and Human Actions, Challenges Common to Highland Territories. This is our first grand angle, wide angle. I remind you that you can use the interface to ask your questions live to the guests. And I am pleased to welcome my guests, starting with you, Dr. Aline Tribolet. Hello, hello. Thank you for having invited me. She is live with us from Reunion Island. Dr. Tribolet, can you hear me? Yes, I can hear you. So, as I was saying, you're live from Reunion Island. You work there as a research director of reef ecology at the l'Océan IPSL laboratory. So you're a researcher in the Institut de Recherche pour le Développement, IRD. In particular, you are working on two projects in the region, both of which are linked to the study of nature-based solutions. Thank you very much, Aline, for being with us today. Dr. Jay Dorga, hello.
Researcher at the local university, which is known as Université des Mascareignes, where you're the head of the Earth and Ocean Lab. Thank you, Jay, for coming on to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Christophe Legrand, bonjour.
Bonjour.
Alors, vous êtes coordinateur du projet.
Christophe Legrand, hello. You're the coordinator of the RICOS project, which is a coastal resilience project in the Western Indian Ocean, funded in part by the French Development Agency, AFD, among others. It aims at strengthening the resilience of coastal populations to the effects of climate changes. We're looking forward to hearing what you can tell us, Christophe Legrand.
Can you hear me, Josh?
I can hear you well. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. You're joining us live from Comoros, where you're currently working as a senior scientist on behalf of Cordio East Africa, which is a Kenya-based NGO working on coral reefs, small-scale fisheries, and applying science to conservation and policy. Thank you so much, Josh, for being part of this as well.
Thank you.
Océans sous pression entre menaces climatiques et actions humaines.
Oceans under pressure between climate trends and human actions, challenges common to island territories. This is the title of our first panel discussion. We will start with you, Dr. Tribolet, Director of Research at IRD. I'd like to start by asking you if you agree to set the scene, quote unquote. Maybe tell us what the stakes are, and possibly with figures, and organizing this discussion around two notions: the impact of climate change and the impact of human activity on marine biodiversity. Dr. Triboulet, you have the floor. Thank you very much for having given me the floor. Yes, as you said, oceans represent 70% of the Earth's surface. But just to add to what was said in the introduction, they provide $70 billion American dollars per year in terms of economic activity, and they provide a livelihood, and they feed more than 3 billion people across the planet. So it's a huge resource. And if we focus on islands and coastal tropical areas, which are peopled by reef corals, together with the seagrass beds and mangroves, these ecosystems are a very small part of the ocean, and yet they are home to 25% of the marine biodiversity, 1/4, and they form natural barriers protecting islands and coasts against natural disasters, tsunami, or other kinds of disasters following an earthquake. And they protect the whole human activity, and they protect the coastal areas from erosion and the risk of being submerged. These ecosystems also provide us with more than 200 billion American dollars every year, depending on the studies. And they play a very essential role in the carbon cycle, as was said in the introduction. They catch 30% of the carbon and store it. So if we consider the last GIEC IPCC report, it showed in 2019 that with the current climate warming plus the local anthropic pressures, this could lead to the death of coral reef by the end of 2050. So before the end of the century, we have lots of uncertainties on this regard, and scientists across the world are looking into the ecosystems to see how they can be preserved and restored. Thank you, Dr. Triboulet. While you were talking, we saw some pictures that you provided us with, and that show the efforts that are being made to protect the biodiversity, and you rightly explained that it allows to restore and protect, among others, the coral reefs and the fish resources. They protect human life also against the natural disasters such as tsunamis, as you said. Dr. J. Dorga.
Over the course of your work, you sort of uncover the ways in which this island and its ecosystems are changing. And you explained that, for instance, locals, human beings out here have not done such a great job in terms of protecting these ecosystems. Why is it that you insist on the crucial importance of close coordination between scientists and policymakers?
Yeah, so actually our natural ecosystems has degraded as a function of time. And what we see, for instance, actually a lot of they actually attribute a lot on climate change, but we might not only turn to climate change. So there are many other issues, like we cannot neglect that part, that there are anthropogenic pollution, so human-based.
Anthropogenic is human-induced.
Human-induced pollutions. And so I would like just to mention a few facts. For instance, like we did our research, and so it is currently under review at the moment in an international journal. And what we find, for instance, we identified how land degradation is changing from actually 1994 to 2024. And what we notice is, for instance, during that 3 decades, we lost about 10% of our tree cover. So 10% of our tree cover, our settlement areas in Mauritius tripled, so increased by 3 times. And also we did an economic valuation of our natural resources, and we found that our natural ecosystem service value declined by $4.2 million US. So just to say that it has degraded during these 3 decades. Now, we did additional studies, for instance, in the southeast to analyze our mangrove cover. So we tried to analyze our mangrove cover to see what is happening. In general, it is increasing, mangroves in Mauritius. But we noticed, for instance, in a certain region, such as Bambou-Verrieux, so we noted a decline of 35% from 2009 to 2024. And this reason was because they were clearing mangroves to actually plant coconut trees. So because of a nearby expansion of a hotel. So all these figures to say that, of course, that human has a role to play.
Thank you, Dr. Durga. We can clearly see the sort of very concrete connection between environmental and economic impacts for local biosystems and population. Christophe Legrand, coordinateur du projet RECOS.
Christophe Legrand, coordinator of the RECOS project. When we were preparing for this broadcast, you told us about a notion which is central to your philosophy, that of integrated management. What is it? Just in a few words. What is it used for? Well, we talk about integrated management of coastal areas, and now we'll come to a very simple definition, but first I'd like to specify the difference between the coast, just the land that is along the sea, from the coastal area, which can go into the sea until the coral reef, and on the land up to the first hills and mountains. And so this is very difficult because we have many users. We have fishers, we have tourism with tour operators, we have urban areas, we have the forest behind, just to keep it simple. And we see that they all influence each other. So interaction between all the local players, the physical reality, the economic situation, local situation, absolutely. And the simple definition consists in saying, okay, we'll take all these players, a fisherman, a tour operator, a hotel manager, somebody from the government. We'll bring them all together and we're going to tell them, you find the solution. You plan, you manage the coastal area in such a way that everybody will be happy, including the future generations. And you will tell me what they're going to fight. And that's precisely where integrated management of coastal areas will be the tool so that they can find a consensus and come to a shared solution. Reaching a consensus, okay, I'll get back to you. But first of all, I'd like to go to a different ocean.
Caribbean Ocean. On va aller à Aruba dans les Caraïbes. Donc on change.
So we're going to go to Aruba. We change to a different ocean. We're going to look at a resilience program for sustainable energy and biodiversity called Raise and Bead, and it's in Aruba. And look, it's fascinating. Program in favor of resilience, sustainable energy, energy and biodiversity. The main objective is turning the tide to contribute to the restoration, conservation of a coastal environment.
So I manage the development and implementation of all the projects in the 12 OCTs related to marine biodiversity, protection and conservation. They know the issues best. They've experienced the hurricanes, they've experienced loss of fishery stocks, they've experienced pollution, they've experienced the increase in tourism. They are the ones who need to drive the solutions. And the reason for that is not just because they know best, but it's because if you want to have sustainable change in a society, in an economy, in an environmental system, it needs to be intrinsically driven by the people. There is no sustainable solution that can be found if it is just top-down or transplanted into a society. Those solutions need to come from the society itself. So that's really the change that we want to support and that we want to see here, is that we've already seen how incredible the people are in the OCTs and in terms of their drive to find solutions to some of the issues that they continue to face. And they know how to do that best. We just want to facilitate that and depart from that aspect of development cooperation.
Gorgeous images coming out of Aruba in the Caribbean Ocean. Joshua Rambahin-Yarison, and sorry if I'm mispronouncing your last name, live with us from Comoros and senior scientist for Cordio, East Africa. You just heard that gentleman there insisting on how important it is to get cooperation from locals. And you explained to me that at times locals aren't necessarily convinced that they should support the efforts that you promote in terms of, preserving biodiversity. How do you go about convincing the local population, fishermen, for instance, that it's important to protect and it's in their interest to preserve biodiversity?
Yeah, absolutely, Gallagher. I mean, that, as mentioned, it's a key part of it, right? If local communities don't see the need for conservation or like managing their resources, then they're not going to invest the time or the trust in working with us, right? Honestly, I understand. People are focused on meeting their immediate needs, feeding family, earning a living. We talk about mid-term or long-term sustainability, while in many of the countries, for instance, in the region, a lot of people concerns is just to put something on the table for dinner. Right? So conservation sometimes can be seen also as a luxury or even a threat, especially if not clearly linked to their day-to-day reality. So that's why basically our work is very community driven, and one of the first things that we do is to create space for dialogue. It's not about showing up with solution, but more about listening and building together. So we try to understand their challenges. We learn from their knowledge and their relationship with the resources, and then we work to connect the dots, right? Like for instance, showing how the decline in shark population isn't just an ecological issue, but it's also affecting their fish catch, the health of the reef, and the long-term livelihood. So yeah, we use participatory approach. We share data in simple visual format, and we invite the community to join our surveys and even tagging shark along us. So that way it becomes part of the process.
Thank you so much, Jav, live with us from Comoros and senior scientist at Cordio, East Africa. Dr. Triboulet, si je peux me tourner vers vous à présent.
Dr. Triboulet, if I may turn back to you again, you're live with us from Reunion Island. You are the research director at IRD. Why do you think nature-based solutions are the best way to conserve and restore ecosystems and also mitigate some of the effects of climate change? Well, nature-based solutions have been studied. I know that there are restoration projects in progress. In Mayotte, we're trying to do something with the Futur Maoris project. It's an interdisciplinary project. The idea being to understand the relationship between the community and the environment so that we can raise awareness in the population to the benefits of active restoration and preservation, while bearing in mind that there is a local situation we need to factor in. Comoros, Reunion Island, or Polynesian Islands, the situation is different in each of those, and there is a local culture, a local context. Sorry for interrupting, but what you're saying is very important, because the first thing that struck me when I talked to people who live in different areas in the Indian Ocean is that we should not try to find a one-size-fits-all solutions. All these islands are different. They have their specific features, absolutely. And we try to develop an interdisciplinary approach based on social and human sciences, anthropology, education. Different aspects are taken in consideration to understand how the community, how the population works within an ecosystem. This is what we call a reef socio-ecosystem in the island. And if we consider the nature-based solutions, there are several approaches consisting in finding the best coral structures that we can grow in nursery. Can we recreate a functional ecosystem, a resilient ecosystem? That is the question that we're considering. And with which kind of equipment or materials? You have seen on the screen that there are different materials based on what we can find and collect locally. Does that make sense? Does it have an impact? We try to introduce an integrated approach to understand the impact of a real-life experience like the one we're conducting in Mayotte Island. If advantages and disadvantages, are there more advantages than disadvantages in these attempts to restore the reefs. I mean, there is so much that we need to look into before we find something that is sustainable with low cost and low carbon materials. Thank you, Dr. Triboulet. Please don't forget to send observations and questions through the interface. And we have one question here. I don't know where it comes from, but the question has been asked on LinkedIn, and I will ask you the question. Careful, it's very complex, Christophe Legrand. So if you don't have the answer, don't worry. I will submit it to the others. What geostrategic role is played by the multimodal corridors in the ocean preservation? First of all, could you explain what a multimodal corridor is, if you have the answer? Maybe Joshua or Dr. Triboulet could explain.
Pardon. Et donc ça va être en fait que
And it's the recognition by ecosystems
va développer des corridors
of currents that will be developed throughout the region to define
paysages en fait.
the whole landscape of an area.
Après sur le rôle qu'ils jouent, bah, c'est cette connectivité.
And the role they play is that they interconnect areas that we tend to disregard if we remain isolated within one country. So I'll ask Aline Triboulet to add something because she's raising her hand, but please keep it short because I would like to ask Jay Dorger to say something. Well, it's already been explained, but the protected marine areas are only efficient if they are being reinforced, supported with a reinforced protection wide enough and connected with each other, because otherwise it's not going to be an efficient attempt.
About a very concrete instance where flooding back in 2013 in Mauritius caused, I think, about a dozen deaths. How do you go about making sure that the strategies that you actually put together and propose, when enacted, can contribute to mitigating these types of very real and life-threatening risks?
So it is true that in 2013 we had 11 deaths. Actually, it took place in Port Louis, so the capital city of Mauritius. Yeah. And actually we published a paper on that, so to reveal some strategies, what can be done. And usually the strategies fall into two different categories. The first one is nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions, they are low-cost solutions. So what can be done, for instance, is if we could have green roofs, for instance, because the situation of Port Louis is quite complex. So a lot of buildings, high urbanization, lots of concrete and lots of asphalt. So usually green solutions, such as green roofs, can be effective. So we have, for instance, bioretention swales, rain gardens. So all of these are traditional solutions. But what we propose in the paper, for instance, is to try to, because flooding takes place, and where actually those people died, it was actually under in the underground tunnel. So if we could close this underground tunnel and instead have a pedestrian bridge instead, that could solve the situation. But more to that, actually, I would like to add, if it is possible, to resort to hard engineering. So we propose like an underground stormwater retention tank. So this was adopted, for instance, in Hong Kong, in the Happy Valley region. So it worked.
And it made a difference. Thank you so much for sharing this. Joshua Rambahini-Arison, still live with us from Comoros. I wanted you to share with
Joshua
our audience.
Rambahini-Arison, live from Comoros.
It's a conversation about the size of the mesh used in order to build traps that are used by local fishermen. Why did you make that recommendation to increase the size of the mesh, and what kind of an impact can it have? And how do you go about convincing these local fishermen, again, that it's in their interest to use these, larger meshes?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, a story from Kenya, indeed, where fishers traditionally use basket traps, as you mentioned, with relatively small mesh size and mainly catching small fish and juveniles, which is not the most sustainable. So instead of trying to convince them outright, to shift for larger mesh size, we went on for a simple experiment with one of the community where we work with, and we started working with fishers, volunteers, try out and build basket traps with slightly larger mesh size, and then we supported them in monitoring their catch and comparing with the fishers who did not shift. So the process took over 3 months. they saw the result firsthand: fewer juveniles, bigger fish, and more valuable fish, resulting in an increase of income, right? And that was the turning point again. Next thing you know, the media shifted using the larger mesh sites and the neighboring communities as well. So
Thank you.
yeah, again, that is that when you get the community that is really involved in the process, change happens.
Thank you so much, John. Christophe Legrand.
Christophe Legrand, we've talked about integrated management. I know that there is another dimension that is very important for you, the regional dimension that I mentioned earlier with Dr. Triboulet when I said that you can't really place all the islands in the same box. Why is the regional dimension so important?
Si on comment dire, on disait qu'il n'y a pas de frontières entre les différents
Well,
écosystèmes.
we say there are no borders between the ecosystems. And if the experience gathered in each of those areas, if we agree with Joshua and we bring somebody from Madagascar to share an experience made by a fisherman in Rodrigo Island, it's going to be easier. They will talk to each other, and I will leave them be. I will not intervene, and they will convince each other. I don't need to do any advocacy. It's what we call in English peer-to-peer learning. People talking to each other who do the same job. Exactly. And if we talk about integrated management, we can get local representatives of the administration to come and talk to, say, a mayor in Réunion Island. We're actually planning this sort of meeting in July. And again, they will talk to each other. They will share some tools. Sometimes the tools cannot be adopted because of a specific feature, a local specific feature, but sometimes they can learn from each other. And I think it's going to work better than us trying to sell it to them. Dr. Triboulet, live with us from Réunion Island. Just a couple of sentences. Back to one sentence that you said when we were preparing for this broadcast, and it struck me. You said, without living beings, mankind is in danger. What does it mean exactly for everybody watching us today? Well, I think we should remind those listening in that if we're here today, I mean, that it's the origin of life is ocean. It's the oxygen provided by the ocean, by living beings, by trees. Our food comes from life. And if we don't protect living beings, regardless of which kind of living being we're talking about, we can no longer breathe air, eat, drink. So we can all contribute. We can all do something. Consumers have a huge power because they can change the way they consume. They have a huge power today. And we are really trying to highlight the fact that education, including education of the younger generation, is a good lever to change society, support development, support research, and act on the local level, on the regional level, on the national level, and on the international level. It goes without saying, because we're all in the same boat. Well, that was a very nice metaphor. Pollution and climate change, unfortunately, know no borders. And as you said, Dr. Triboulet, we have to have a local and regional and international approach. Thank you to all four of you. Joshua Rambari-Nyarison, thank you, Christophe Legrand, project coordinator. Thank you for having shared your insight.
With us. Et enfin, merci une fois encore à vous.
And thank you again, Dr. Triboulet, Research Director at IRD. Thank you, all four of you. And now I have the great pleasure of going with you towards a beach that the locals are familiar with, the Albion Beach, where we're going to meet a very special artist. This will be the Nouveau Regard sequence. Now, the beauty of this moment we're sharing can is that we're going to listen to you playing music. You brought some instruments that you made yourself. But just a few words about the philosophy from trash to music. What exactly is it? Well, it's more than just banging on tins or plastic bottles. It's a whole philosophy. The idea is to mitigate the problems that society is facing in my own way, in a positive way. I don't want to tell people do this or don't do that. I tell them we can do it this way. So that's my message. What I want to get across is we share things. I don't make my instruments to sell them. I share them with the community. I place them between the hands of younger and not so young musicians. And this is what I do in Mauritius and across the world. So, okay, can we share this musical message with all those listening to us? Take your time. Your musical instruments are splendid. We can see that you made them from plastic, from wood. Everything was collected in landfills is trash. I've seen them on the beaches, strewn across the beaches, these plastic bottles, and instead of throwing them away, you use them. Absolutely. In the past, people would use animal skin or wood to make instruments. Well, we have trash in our environment, so we use the trash. What's the name of the musical piece? It's called Téleux. I'm going to play the short part, but it's about water. And we forget how important water is. In Mauritius, the first populations settled in because there was water available. So it's a bit of an irony to play music with a PVC tube that is used for plumbing in houses. So I'm going to mix several instruments and we're going to listen to Kang Chan Kin playing Delo. Absolutely stunning. Thank you very much. I get the feeling that you're both an artist and an activist, and it's your way of acting. You're doing a very special tour with a ship. Yes, it's a Plastic Odyssey ship traveling across the world. They stopped for a while in the Indian Ocean, and we met when they stopped in Mauritius, and I find their work very inspiring. And we made an instrument. They gave me a board from a pallet? Yes, because that ship collects pollution. Yes, they collect pollution. They have a micro factory on the ship, and they go from countries to countries to talk to people, to share ideas, and what they do is absolutely fantastic. And your philosophy, which is heard, is can be found from a book that will be published in July. Yes, this is 3 years worth of work. The idea is to share with as many people as possible my ideas and what I do. And I thought, writing a book was also a way to get a foothold in the academic world. I'd like you to share with us a figure. I heard you say this some years ago. You said that in average, every person living in Mauritius generates 2.3 kilos of trash every day. That's a very concrete way to illustrate the issue of trash. What do we do with the trash? It's difficult to imagine. We weigh, say, 60 kilos or 80 kilos. And for somebody like us to be alive, it means that we produce tons of trash during our life. And I started with electronic music, and then I remember a time when I worked in trade. I was in the trade of textile, and when I discovered that textile was one of the most polluting industry, 3,000 liters of water to make a pair of jeans, I thought, no, this doesn't make sense. And people told us there is no more water in the tanks, stop filling your swimming pools, but there is so much that we haven't done upstream. And I want people to start thinking about the way we live. Yes, and what makes sense is the idea of passing things on. And here in Mauritius, lots of traditions are passed on orally. So you learned from your ancestors. And why is it important at the heart of your philosophy? Where in the islands, family values are deeply rooted. I went to see the older generation. I talked to them. There was no internet. I mean, it was just human contact, and I learned from their culture. And I was so sorry because there are some musical instruments that have disappeared from Madagascar, from Eastern Africa. And I realized that modern instruments, everybody wants to play drums and piano and guitar, but we are forgetting some of the more traditional instruments. And I want people to know them. Whether they play them doesn't make any difference, but at least they know it's part of our culture. Or for those who are watching us, whether they are young or not so young, and who are wondering how they can contribute to help you with this attempt of yours to increase awareness, what would you recommend they can do? Small gestures that will make a difference for our planet. It should not be felt as pressure. I mean, there is an emergency for climate change, but you should all do something in your own way, what makes you comfortable. I have been the advocate for environmental related activism, but it was always a fight. We were opposing somebody. I'd rather do it the other way around. You have to be positive, and love should guide us in everything we do. Well, so your book will be published very soon. I'll show you From Trash to Music. 20 musical instruments from different families. And here we have a section dedicated to local music. And I tell the story, I explain the cultural context in which these instruments are used, how I made them, how to play them. Thank you very, very much. And would like to tell you about the Festival du Vivant in Port-Louis, the capital of Mauritius, 23rd and 24th of May, during the World Day of Biodiversity. This festival will be celebrating art and biodiversity thanks to the support of Varuna, ARD, Expertise France. And so don't miss this. It will be at the House of Digital Art, and we are going back to the Institut Français de Maurice for the second part of our broadcast. So we're back in the Institut Français in Mauritius for the second panel discussion, collective response to regional threats. It's our second grand angle sequence. You should and must use the interface to ask questions to our guests.
Thank you for joining us today. You're the co-founder of Nature Yetu, which in English and in Swahili means our nature. Beautiful name. Your focus is on promoting and supporting evidence-based conservation in Mauritius through communication, capacity building, and research. Thank you again, Fabiola, for being with us today. Hugh Dalton, hello? Can Hugh Dalton hear me? And can we hear Hugh Dalton?
Hello. Yes.
You're the co-director of Dahari, a Comorian NGO focused on restoring ecosystems, notably forests and reefs, in the Comoros archipelago. Thank you, Hugh, for joining us live from the UK.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And Méline Tarrer, bonjour. Alors, vous êtes directrice par intérim du département
Hello,
économie.
Méline Tarrer. You're the acting director of the Blue Economy and Sustainable Fisheries Department at the Indian Ocean Rim Association, an association of Indian Ocean coastal countries. You are an international technical expert and you are an important link between the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ocean Africa Department. Sivani Pinandi, I hope I pronounced it well. I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Hello and welcome to you too. Hello, Gallagher. Hello, everybody. Thank you for the invitation. You're welcome. You're live from Reunion Island. You are coordinator for nature experts within France's natural reserves. And you're currently working on the Varuna project. We've already talked about this Varuna project. It aims to halt the erosion of biodiversity in island territories. Thank you very much for being with us, Seveni, for this broadcast. And we will also hear in a few minutes Lea de Oliveira, Program Manager for the Odisseo Foundation. She's going to bring us back into the field to show us the mangrove that she is restoring. She's coordinating the restoration. It's absolutely fantastic and it's fascinating in a few minutes. So this will be the second roundtable, collective responses to Indian Ocean challenges, local experiences and regional dynamics. And I'm going to start with Fabiola.
You work closely with scientists, and so you help them produce research. How do you make sure that the research they produce doesn't turn into a stack of paper which just sits idly on someone's desk? How to make sure that locals, stakeholders, policymakers actually grab a hold of that research and use it, implement it?
Yes. So, first of all, there is no universal answer to that. But I will take example from one of the projects we're working on, which is unfortunately not on ocean, but it can be transferred to different types of practices. So there is actually an amazing researcher. Hi, Ashmi, if you're watching. So she's a PhD student at the University of Mauritius and also an active member.
Is that the Université des Mascareignes?
No, Mauritius.
Sorry.
No, but she's also an active member of Nature Unies. She has been conducting research on cave ecosystem and also looking at the threats to the caves and also to cave bats, which are threatened species. And last year, Nature Unies worked with her. She's a member, but we're also supporting her in analysis of her research. And we published a paper. Great. Yeah. Now, what next?
We can see you with your colleagues of Nature Yetu actually on these images that you provided us with, engaging with locals and all that. Exactly. Please go ahead.
So now there's a paper out. Now, what do you do with it? Because there's a lot of information that are applicable for conservation. Now, what do we do? Now, at our levels, I can summarize it in terms of 3 areas of works. We have got the paper that tells us what are the threats to caves, and also giving us some kind of pointer towards the need to better understand the why of a human behavior. So there's 3 aspects, 3 areas of work we are doing. The first one is communicate about the paper, not just about the science, but what are the results? What are the meanings of the results? And how can we use that to scale up conservation of cave ecosystem? Communicate through language that is understandable to diverse audience. Videos, articles, through conversation like this one, through workshop. And the second area of work is it's really to try to do pilot project. You've got the research. Now, can we do some pilot tests and see how can we engage people, developing strategies and testing the strategies, and then see if it works and what doesn't, help us to develop a much longer term strategic approach. And then the third part, which for me is very important, is...
Briefly, if you can.
Yes, very quickly. The third part is also to shine a light on these people doing the research. Because they know what they are doing, they need to be seen, and when they are seen, they are given opportunities to be at the table where decisions are made.
Thank you, Fabiola. Allez, on rentre tout de suite dans le dur avec une question pour vous, Méline
Thank you,
Tarrer.
Fabiola. A question for you, Méline Tarrer, from somebody who's connected to the broadcast through the website. We're saying hello. If you don't have the answer, never mind. We will move on. But it's a very specific question. How to legally reinforce cooperation between Indian Ocean islands to jointly protect fish resources. You are the international technical expert, so you're the connection between France and the local territories, Indian Ocean territories. Well, I'll give you an example that was adopted yesterday by the Council of Ministry, developing best practice guides in order to allow experts to sit around the same table, talk to each other, understand what is at stake, understand the challenges that they are facing, so that we make sure that fish resources are protected. At Ayora, we developed a best practice guide to fight illegal fishing, illegal fisheries, and we base ourselves on the Sea Convention, the various types of FAO documents regarding fish resource protection, and we turned that into a best practice guide so that we have all the stages and which tools we can use. Because there are so many documents available. We just discussed the research documents, but there are many other documents, rules and regulations. Where do we start? What do we do? How do we do it? And whether we can do it together. Can we complete each other? And this is what our organization is trying to do. Thank you, Méline Tarrer. And other questions? This one is for you. It's for you, Sevigny, because it's about protected islands. What mechanisms are implemented to protect endangered marine species? We got that question through the website, and thank you very much to the person who asked the question. Sevigny. Thank you. What mechanisms to protect marine resources? Well, we have the red lists. I will answer the question quickly. Those are tools being set up by bodies trying to assess and protect the species. We assess the level of danger that they are facing, and then we come up with protocols to protect them and to monitor endangered species. We also want to talk about cooperation exchange of information, and pooling of information is what matters most for protection. Thank you very much, Sevigny. Hugh Dalton.
When preparing for this show, you really insisted on the importance of peer-to-peer learning, which I was just mentioning in the previous roundtable. Why is peer-to-peer learning so important, and why is it that you insist on this idea that change should not be imposed from the outside, but should come from the locals themselves? Why is that so important, according to you?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to have impact in the long term, then it's not just what we produce, but the process we go through to get those results. So we can put an area of reef into protection, but the process that is used to put that area of reef into protection is very important. And in participatory processes, we're trying to put fishers in the lead in decision making, and it can be messy and it can take time. But if we want to have empowerment and results in the long term, then that's what we have to do.
Thank you so much, Hugh Dalton, for that very sharp and insightful answer. Et j'en profite pour saluer nos amis qui sont les premiers concernés.
Hello to our friends who are in first line, connected to this broadcast, many of them in Madagascar, Comoros, and in Reunion Island, including in the Caribbean, so very far from here, but close to our heart. And here in Mauritius, so we say hello. Méline Tarrer, a very important notion, among others, blue economy. Ever since I came here, even before I came here, everybody was talking about blue economy. What is the blue economy? The blue economy is a concept that was developed some years ago based on the ocean economy, but they added the need for a sustainable economy which is respectful of the environment. So everything that has to do with the hues of the oceans, but with an environmental component. Thank you, Méline. Fabiola.
I'm going to quote you right now. I'm going to read a quote from you, and it's a very powerful one. And it's full of honesty, and I want you to sort of, explain your thinking. You told me, and I quote, "Changing behaviors is also a challenge. Some of us conservationists have a feeling of righteousness because we feel like we're saving the world and everyone should listen to us. Sometimes we have to accept that we may be doing things wrong and we need to change ways, solutions, in our attitudes." What do you mean by that, Fabiola?
What I mean by that is that because we are working on something that is noble, we are protecting nature, it is very easy to think that we are on the right side of things. And because of that, we have a tendency to think in a specific way. We are fixed in our mindset, in the way that we do things, which might have been for decades or even longer. And that also given the risk of being dismissive towards other people's perspective. But when we're doing conservation, not just the conservationists, not just the researchers, but also the funders, there's a bigger picture at play. It's about protecting nature. And in the context of Mauritius, it's protecting our natural heritage that the next generation is going to inherit. So there is a level of accountability that is needed. We cannot use resources ineffectively. We cannot use resources inefficiently. We need to deliver on these ecological outcomes for nature, for biodiversity, but we also need to deliver on the social outcomes. So in summary, there is this need to be willing to ask, what am I doing? Has it achieved what is needed? And if not, how do I change that and adapt?
Willing and humble as well. Thank you so much for that powerful thought, Fabiola. Sévanie Pegnandi, toujours en direct avec nous depuis la Réunion, chargée d'animation.
Live with us from Reunion, coordinator for Nature Space. You say that cooperation is a luxury, and I quote you. We talk about cooperation all the time, but why do you think cooperation is a luxury? What do you mean by that? Just to put things back in context, the project we are coordinating is based on 8 different territories, 8 different political, socioeconomic situations, a very different geopolitical situation. Getting 8 territories to cooperate and getting the managers to get together for a workshop, for a training, allowing to learn from each other, from their peers, is not easy. Sometimes they have to travel for 2 days. They have to take an airplane just to go to attend the training. And when there is a local association with only 3 people to organize training for a whole day, it's not easy. We're facing very different situations in the region, so cooperating, talking to other people, learning from the others is not always easy. It takes time, and it has to be a priority, a top priority. So it is a luxury because cooperation means that you also restrict the time you have to do other things. Thank you, Sévanie Pegnandi, live with us from Reunion Island. I'd like to say hello to Indien Dumandé. Sorry if I mispronounced the name, because he or she is congratulating us. Well, thank you very much for being connected.
Dalton, if I can turn to you again at this point. Let's zoom in on a problem that you know all too well. Reef vulnerability. just so people get a very crisp and clear picture of what that actually means. How bad is that problem in Comoros, where you're usually based out of?
Yeah, so the Comoros is ranked in the top 10 countries in terms of vulnerability to reef degradation. That's analysis that comes from the high dependency on reefs, the high threats to reefs. But I think to understand these sort of problems, we also have to look back into history that has created the social vulnerability that is there now, and the hundreds of years of exploitation and domination in the Comoros that has led poor people to be highly dependent on these resources today. And now the impact of that vulnerability and dependence is most heavily felt by poor people. So it is the poorest people who are most dependent on reef fisheries in the Comoros compared to pelagic fisheries further out to sea.
Thank you, Hugh. Il y a un écho avec ce que vous me disiez en préparant cette émission là
Well, this brings us back to what you said when we were preparing the broadcast Made in Tahrir. He says a lot is expected from the poorer populations, and this is something that you say. Poorer populations, coastal populations are resilient, and people talk about that all the time. But according to you, and tell me if I'm wrong, coastal populations are those that actually benefit less from legal or illegal activities and fishing. Why is that? Well, unfortunately, in the blue economy, the biggest industry is tourism. Big hotels and tour operators think that coastal populations belong to a lower class of populations, not the ones that they are targeting to as tourists. And also the other part of the industry is maritime transport. But maritime transport doesn't give a livelihood to anyone among the coastal populations. And it means sacrifices. When you actually work in maritime transport, you are away from your family for days or weeks, and that means that your family is growing poorer. Currently, coastal populations are expected to be resilient, except that they don't draw resources from the activity, not enough to have a house that will be resilient facing the natural disasters or the climate change. They have to be resilient, but they're not resilient enough to change their means of transportation or their boats to go fishing. And because the fish resources are decreasing, they have to go even further away from their homes to go fishing. So they have to be placed back at the center of the discussion so that redistribution of wealth is more even and more balanced. And it's a matter of training. And somebody listening to us wrote exactly the same thing. Lea de Oliveira, program manager, and for the Odysseum Foundation, and I said we would join them. Well, this is what we're going to do now. We're going to pay a visit to Lea de Oliveira, project manager for the Odysseum Foundation. Hello, Lea de Oliveira. Hello, Gallagher. How are you? Fine. What about you? Thank you for having us in this beautiful working place. You're the program manager for the Odysseum Foundation. Now, this here is one of the ecosystems, a mangrove, that you're working in. What is exactly a mangrove? What do you do concretely? Well, this is the mound, one of the mangrove restoration sites funded by the Varuna program. And the goal here is to plant 10,000 mangrove plants. All these little seedlings, if I understand well, yes, we recover them from the propagule, the parent tree, we nurture and grow them and plant them again. So what is the use of a mangrove? Very good question. Mangroves are not well known. They serve a number of purposes. If you look closely, you will see small fish swimming, escaping, getting away. Yes, I've seen some small fish and crabs in the water. Precisely, mangroves act as nurseries. Fish that we eat come and multiply very often here. The fry will grow here and then go back to the sea. Something else you can see with the naked eye, the mangrove's capacity to filter water and retain sediments. Yes, I can feel it under my feet, a mix of sand and sediments. That's precisely why mangroves can capture 5 times more carbon than normal forests. You celebrate this ecosystem with all its biodiversity, but not everybody agrees. not everybody has the same attitude towards it. Why is that? Well, it's mostly due to the fact that they don't know the mangroves. Mangroves, in spite of everything they do for us, are unrecognized and misunderstood. Some fishermen believe they stop them from catching fish. Others think they smell bad, or that they are where the mosquitoes will propagate. I am tempted to say that the number one enemy is the fact they block the view. Exactly. People want to get rid of them to have a better view. And sometimes it's difficult to negotiate. You at the Odysseus Foundation, you restore ecosystems in some mangroves, but it doesn't stop there. You conduct other kinds of activities, I think. Yes, we have a project for a nursery to grow seagrass beds. We have a project to restore corals through the method of sex reproduction. We have one for the restoration of an archipelago belonging to Mauritius known as Saint-Mandon. And finally, one for the bioeconomy hub, a place where we can bring together all the players involved in conservation, both public and private. Okay, I'd like to close with a concept that is very dear to your heart. It is at the core of your philosophy. By the way, your philosophy is Blue the Future. What does it mean exactly? Well, in French, pour un avenir bleu, for a blue future, because very few people know that 99.9% of Mauritius is ocean. And a large share of our economic activities are based on the ocean, such as tourism, fishing, just to mention those two. We think the future should focus on the blue color, the ocean, and that all the restoration and conservation projects are vital to ensure the future of Mauritius. Something else that you're very attached to, the notion of biomimicry. Could you tell us a few words about biomimicry before I leave, Leah? Biomimicry is the capacity to draw inspiration from nature for our own technologies. We know that in nature, high biodiversity helps ecosystems be more resilient. So our philosophy is also to encourage different partnerships with a diversity of players to improve the resilience of our conservation projects. So it's a diversity of partnerships, really. Exactly, a diversity of partnerships. So thank you very much, Leah de Oliveira, Program Manager for the Odysseus Foundation. Yes, and if you ever want to see us, come and visit us at UNOC. Okay, we will do that. Thank you. Thank you. Very nice interview on beautiful images. Thank you again, Leah de Oliveira, Project Manager for the Odysseus Foundation.
Thank you to the person asking this question. What role, if any, do local fishing communities play in regional policy making?
I'm not sure I'm the best expert in that question. I would say, unfortunately, very little. It's hard enough getting local community voices into national policy making processes. So at the regional level, I think it's likely to be even less than that. And the reality is that local fishing communities still have very little power. And the power is held at national government level, at international NGO level, rather than at the local community level.
Thank you, Hyuge. J'apprends à l'instant des connexions en direct et on s'en
I
réjouit.
just heard that people are connecting from Colombia, Chad, Tunisia, Republic of Congo, Benin, and Ivory Coast. Hello to all the participants. We're very happy to have you with us. Don't hesitate to ask questions and send observations. And when we can, we ask the questions directly to our guests. Stéphanie Pinandi, live with us from Reunion Island. We hear a lot from obstacles. I know that you want to say something about the mechanisms that are slowing down the positive changes with regard to protection and preservation of biodiversity. Can you say a few words, Stéphanie? Well, yes, there are many, many obstacles when we try to cooperate. When we want to cooperate with our neighbors, it's not easy. We should always bear in mind a number of parameters. We have to be very vigilant when we cooperate, because by cooperating, we create a connection between territories, between people. So it's absolutely essential to avoid any misunderstanding. There can be geopolitical misunderstandings, there can be all kinds of misunderstandings, but if they happen, it's counterproductive. It breaks the connection that we're trying to establish to be able to cooperate. At the end of an action, we want people to be able to pick up the phone and simply call each other, call a neighbor to ask for help and ask for a solution because they are facing a solution. They are facing an issue. So we want to create connection and synergies. Thank you, Stéphanie. Fabiola?
One of the issues that you work on and closely monitor is forest degradation. And interestingly enough, you believe that planting trees is not the priority when dealing with forest degradation. That sounds a bit counterintuitive. So if planting trees is not the priority, what should the priority be when fighting forest degradation?
Well, firstly, priority goes wherever emergency lies. I will use an analogy very quickly, if you can allow me. Imagine you have an accident and you're a medic and you're short-staffed. You have a small amount of time to treat people. What are you going to do? You have to do a triage. You're going to assess whose life is at bigger risk, and you're going to attend to these people first. So when it comes to conservation, and particularly in the case of forest conservation in Mauritius, it is the same thing. Where is the biggest threat lying? Where are we losing the most biodiversity? And in Mauritius, the biggest threat is invasive species, particularly invasive plants. We are losing, based on the research done by scientists from the University of Mauritius, not the Mascareignes. Exactly. And they've been monitoring plots, and based on the level of mortality they're getting, if we summarize it, we're losing every 5 minutes a native tree, every 5 minutes. So the scale of loss is enormous, and these trees, they have been growing for decades, probably longer. So that level of loss cannot be left like that, particularly if we are doing reforestation, and I'm not against reforestation, I am for it. If the resources is diverted from the priority to reforestation, we need to question, are we doing what is the most important? Are we diverting the resources where it is the most needed?
Thank you so much, Fabiola Monti. Sévanie Pignandi, maintenant si je peux me tourner vers vous.
Sévanie Pignandi, if I may turn to you. You said it's very important to go there, go to the territories, to create the feeling of proximity with local players. And when you work, this feeling of proximity, what does it do to the local people? Well, for the Varuna project, we really had the opportunity to meet the local managers, to create a connection with them. We knew it was important to go and discover for ourselves the local situation so that we could design trainings, workshops that were really customized and really meeting their local needs. And being close to them, this closeness allowed us to understand the challenges they are facing to implement the actions we're supporting. We have applications for small projects in Madagascar, and they ask for fuel simply. And we ask the question, and when we go there, we see that the villages are very far apart. And to be able to communicate and raise awareness on the distances, they need fuel. And so by going there, by being close to them, by exchanging with them, by meeting them, we understand what exactly they need, and we try to meet those needs. And this closeness has also allowed us to discover how to adjust our support, or the support we offer, especially through training and workshops. Thank you, Sévanie Pignandi. And while we're talking about closeness and proximity to the people on the field, I'd like to read a message we just received through the website. It's a message from an NGO for young people and humanitarians in Mauritius, thanking us for these exchanges, which they believe will help them put in practice what they learned today. So thank you very much, and friendly greetings to the members of the Young Humanitarians NGO in Mauritius. Eline Tarrer, I know that you're familiar with the 3 areas, Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Ocean. Just in one word, could you tell us whether they are similar and whether they are different? We saw images from Aruba in the Caribbean. We talk about the Indian Ocean. You know these areas well. Well, the 3 areas are all facing the same challenges: the rising of the sea level, climate events, natural disasters, population on the islands who worry about their future, whether they will be able to stay on the islands, but they have a different approach depending on the ocean and the different way to manage the ocean. In the Pacific Ocean, they have a very cultural connection with the sea and the ocean. There is, in Fiji, they have what they call vanua. Vanua combines the land and the sea. They bless the ocean and they don't think that the sea becomes to them. So this approach has helped them have rooted systems that are more respectful of the ocean. In the Caribbean, there are many programs, educational programs, where the ocean is a key topic. In primary and secondary school, they learn about the ocean, they learn about the value of the ocean, so they have a different approach. It would be very interesting if in the Indian Ocean we were able to highlight the value of the ocean and highlight the knowledge of the local populations. We will hear the former State Secretary for the Sea and Biodiversity, Member of Parliament Hervé, but I'd like to thank you and quote these populations who say the sea does not belong to us, we belong to the sea. Sivani Penyandi, live from Union Island, in charge of animation coordination for a nature expert. Thank you for spending the time with us this afternoon. Méline Taher, thank you. Acting Director of the Blue Economy and Sustainable Fisheries Department of the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Thank you very much for having participated in this panel discussion.
Thank you for spending this time with us today, sir.
Thank you.
Et enfin, thank you, Fabiola Monti, for your insights, co-founder of Nature Yetu. Et on n'oublie pas, évidemment, Léa de Oliveira. Merci aussi
we
à
don't forget
elle.
Léa de Oliveira. Thank you, Léa de Oliveira, Program Manager for the Odyssea Foundation, for this beautiful sequence in a mangrove near the Le Morne mythical mountain here in Mauritius. Thank you, all five of you, for this panel discussion. We're going to close now with another sequence called Perspectives. We now have the pleasure of welcoming a Member of Parliament, Hervé Berville. Good morning, Mr. Member of Parliament. Hello, thank you for the invitation, and thank you for all those who are connected from across the world and around the four oceans of our blue planet. Yes, all oceans are well represented, and you are live from France, with us from Paris, in your office at the National Parliament, because if I'm not mistaken, you are a Member of Parliament for the Côte d'Armor department, so you're familiar with the sea, you live close to the sea, and until recently, you were the State Secretary for State, French Secretary of State for the Sea, so the sea is very close to your heart. And could you please start by telling us, without giving any preferences, but telling us about a sentence you heard that may have struck you during these panel discussions, something you would like to highlight and underline? Well, thank you very much, and thank you to Expertise France and all the partners for having organized this event just before the Congress in Nice. It's important that we exchange information and that we become aware that we are a group of passionate people who want to protect the ocean and the marine ecosystems. We think we have to take the time to talk to each other and exchange best practices so to gather more energy in the fight against the climate change for a sustainable development. And I am a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee at the French Parliament, and we see that across the world, unfortunately, the progress made to protect the ocean is now being questioned by big countries who used to defend the ocean, the United States being one of them. And more than ever, I believe that we need to say that the ocean, especially the Indian Ocean, plays an essential role in the fight against climate deregulation. We need to defend the resilience of the ecosystems because it's essential for our economy. There will be no such thing as a sustainable economy in the Indian Ocean if we run out of fish, if there is no more mangrove or coral reef. And France is responsible for part of it because we're everywhere in the oceans and because we also have overseas territories, local players who were pioneers in the fight to preserve mangroves and marine ecosystems. And so we will do our best to cooperate. The one thing that struck me, I'll get to the chase, it was the fact that the populations are taken in consideration, the local players. Too often, we have thought that preservation and restoration should be decided at the top, but this is no longer the case. And when I was a member of the government, I went to the Indian Ocean, I went to the Pacific to listen to local populations, to adjust the solutions to the local needs and the local people's needs. Exactly, the local populations. It's important that we take them in consideration to implement the solutions. But what would you like to say regarding the problems we have mentioned? And again, I would like to thank all those who are connected and watching us from the African continent or across the world in Latin America. I think we're all fully aware of how serious the problems are, the problems pertaining to biodiversity, marine biodiversity. Mr. Member of Parliament, what would you like to say about these issues? What do you mean? Words about problems? I think the word that comes across all the discussions is cooperation. Cooperation between science and policymakers, science and territories. There's no way we are going to solve the problem of coral reefs, the fight against illegal fishing, or improving knowledge without cooperation. Economic cooperation, regional cooperation, it may be taken for granted, but actually we are living in a world which is extremely fragmented, increasingly fragmented, and people tend to fall back onto themselves for identity or trade reasons. And unfortunately, this trend is not a good trend. It's not going to tell us towards cooperation. So we should say that cooperation is not a form of weakness. Cooperation is about respecting everybody's identity, but we need cooperation to defend the ocean. There's only one ocean. We have this blue planet, and it's our role to protect this blue planet. Cooperation is about listening to others, understanding where they come from. It's about using local knowledge, and it's essential to meet our common objectives and goals. Mr. Member of Parliament, you were saying a minute ago that citizens are directly concerned, those who are here with us and those who are watching us online. They're all convinced. But they're probably asking themselves questions. What is the impact I can have as a private individual? And to those asking this question to themselves, what would be your recommendation? You already have provided answers in your previous statement, but would you like to add something? Decision makers cannot solve all the problems, and even the communities cannot. So we have to interact at different levels and act at different levels. I tell the younger generation, if you're not interested in politics, politics will become interested in you one way or another. I'll give you an example. When we came to the government in 2022, there was one topic which was slightly left to the side, mining of the bed of the oceans. And young activists called me to attention. They did it on the social networks, but, they started asking us about laws or legislations to protect the ocean from underwater mining. Underwater mining means going into the Pacific Ocean or the Indian Ocean to dig and find ores that would be helpful for the ecological transition, except it's going to be bad for the bed of our oceans. And so they thought, if we can talk to the minister, maybe we will get an answer. And after a while, there was a meeting. We accepted to meet with those activists and those young people who were fighting a marginal fight. All of a sudden, came under the limelight, and the topic became a priority for our ministry. And the President of the Republic in Sharm el-Sheikh in September of 2022 announced that France was in favor of a stay in the use of seabeds for mining purposes. And now there are more than 32 countries opposing this kind of use of the seabed. So it means that everyone can play a role. Everyone can play a role. Thank you. Yes, everyone can play a role, from the scientists to the activists, and this can lead to multilateral actions. Well, we got the message, Mr. Member of Parliament. Yes, be active to defend our blue planet. You summarize it. Yes, mobilize yourselves to defend the planet. This is for everybody, especially the thousands of people who are listening across the world. It makes us happy, it makes us proud. And apparently there are many people watching us online from micro-island states. And we say hello, we support them. And before we close, I would like to tell you about two events, 23rd and 24th of May, the Festival du Vivant in Mauritius, with a number of partners, the DCM Foundation, Varuna. It will be in the House of Digital Arts. It's free of charge, so please don't miss it. And with Jeremy Pellet, General Manager of Expertise France, at the beginning of the broadcast, we talked about the big event in the wake of which we are organizing this event. In a few weeks, mid-June, in Nice, the UNOC 3, the United Nations Summit meeting on the oceans. We will be there. We hope to see you there. And if you are there, come and say hello. And in the meantime, wherever you are, have a nice evening or a nice day. Take care of yourselves and of the others, of the ocean, of the sea, and of the biodiversity we'll live in. Thank you very much for sharing this event with us, and see you very soon for another event, Rendez-vous de l'expertise.